This week, Nigeria launched a $750 million push to build its own cloud. Two companies just partnered to build Africa's first sovereign AI computing platform. And month earlier, when the Nigerian-owned oil refinery threatened to end foreign fuel imports for good, the World Bank recommended reopening those imports. Two industries, one facet, and this is that pattern. To understand what is happening in Lagos right now, you have to go back further than oil. Back to Matabele land, modern-day Zimbabwe. In 1888, King Lobengula ruled one of the most powerful kingdoms in the region, and C.C. Rudd wanted what was underneath it, gold. But Rudd did not send an army at first. He sent a group of negotiators. Among them is Charles Rudd, Rochford Maguire, Francis Thompson, 3 men, all at Lobengula court with an offer, guns, a monthly payment, and a concession the right to dig for mineral on his land. Lobengula wasn't naive. He negotiated. He set his own condition. No more than 10 white men allowed on his territory at any time, and they were limited to mining only, nothing more. In his mind, he believed he had protected his kingdom. He had it in writing, so what do you expect? The paper he signed became known as the Rudd Concession, and within 5 years, that one document has been stretched far beyond what Lobengula agreed to. It became the legal basis for the British South American Company Charter and eventually for the colonization of his entire kingdom. Now, his condition didn't disappear because he negotiated badly. They disappeared when the other side no longer needed his permission. And that is the part of this story that matters more than the date itself. It's not just that a king was deceived once. It is that the same thing follow a pattern. Negotiate, agree to a limit, then discard those limits when the balance of power changes. And I want you to keep that pattern in mind because you are about to see it again. Now, jump more than a century ahead to Nigeria, 2026. For decades, Nigeria imported most of its refined fuel. Crude went out, refined fuel came back in at a markup through supply chains control outside Nigeria. Then, the Dangote Refinery came online, eventually reaching production of about 661,000 barrels a day. For the first time in generation, Nigeria had the capacity to supply itself. In January 2026, the government suspended new import licenses. The law was already there. The Petroleum Industry Act of 2021 restricts fuel import when local refining capacity exists. So, Nigeria wasn't making up new rules. It was using its own law now that the country finally had something to protect. Then, guess what? On April 7th, the World Bank published its Nigeria Development Update, and buried inside an otherwise routine economy report was a recommendation to reopen the import licenses. The argument was simple. The suspension had reduced competition and allowed price to rise above import parity level. Restoring import, the report argued, would bring competition back. Competition, that is the word that matters because we've heard this word before. Back in 1888, competition was one of part of the argument around Lobengula concession. But once the company needed more men, the limit he had agreed to didn't matter anymore. The backlash was immediate and it came from more than one side. Dangote Industry called the recommendation fundamentally flawed. The argument was simple. If import come back without strong standard, they could undercut the refinery Nigeria had just spent billions building. Nigeria economists also pointed out something even more basic. The recommendation appeared to conflict with Nigeria's own Petroleum Industry Act. A 60-page report and the law already on the books didn't get an attention at all. Then, within 2 days, the report was gone. Pulled from the World Bank website, a page found error sat where the document used to be. On April 9th, the bank issued a clarification. It didn't exactly apologize. It admitted that the recommendation may run counter to efforts countries around the world are making to protect energy and national security. In a simple term, the bank reconsidered. And not because Nigeria changed its law, but because Nigeria pushed back. Days later, World Bank President Ajay Banga met personally with Aliko Dangote on the sideline of the IMF World Bank spring meeting in Washington. Now, there is another side to this story, and we have to talk about it because if we leave it out, the story becomes too simple. This week, in a Lagos courtroom, it's not the World Bank raising the word monopoly this time around. It's Nigeria-owned oil company NNPC accusing Dangote of trying to do something that sounds very similar. Pushing to stop the import licenses of competing marketers, NNPC argues that this could lead Nigeria fuel supply dependent on one company. One point of failure, they call it. So, this was never simply outsider versus Africa. There is another question inside Nigeria. Is concentrated power dangerous only when it sits in Washington? Or is it dangerous no matter who controls it, regardless of whose flag is on the building? But there is something that stays consistent in all of this. Look at the timing. The word monopoly gets loudest when someone stops needing to import. Here's why the oil story is not really about oil. Because right now, Nigeria business send an estimated $850 million a year overseas. Not for fuel, but for cloud computing. Every AI model trained, every data set processed, a lot of it run through servers in Europe and North America. Because the infrastructure to do so here didn't exist yet. This week, that started to change. The Federal Ministry of Communication, Innovation and Digital Economy unveiled Nigerian National Digital Cloud Policy. The target? $750 million in a private investment over the next 24 months. $250 million in 1 year. And a new requirement that national security data, financial data, and identity data be hosted inside Nigeria, not routed abroad. The same week, two companies, Analytics Intelligence and Open Access Data Center, announced a partnership to build sovereign AI computing infrastructure on Nigeria's soil. AI computing hosted locally so Africa financial institutions and businesses can train and run without their data leaving the country or leaving the continent. And this isn't just something sitting on a paper. Because Kasi Cloud Lekki Campus, West Africa's first hyperscale AI-capable data center has already been operating since the month of May. It is sitting on the same soil, next to the same subsea cable that once mainly carried data out of the continent. Now look at the pattern. Africa built the capacity to stop depending on someone else, and once that happens, someone else loses the business they used to get from Africa. If oil is any indication of what comes next, the word monopoly or something that sounds a lot like it could come again. Not necessarily because the infrastructure is unsafe, but because Africa may no longer need to get that service outside. Nobody handed Nigeria a refinery, and nobody is handing it a cloud. But both have to be built, paid for, protected by the people who live here. And both are being built against a challenge that has a very old shape. A shape that goes back to a signature on a piece of paper in 1888. And conditions that lasted only as long as the other side needed them to. As I'll be saying in my previous video on this channel, the pattern doesn't change, only the industry does. Because in the end, there are two questions Africa should always ask. Whose does this serve, and what does Africa keep on lose? If you find this insightful, I urge you to subscribe to this channel and follow us on all our social media platforms because these are the kind of story I keep track of. I'll see you in the next one.